Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Empowerment Through Education, Seats at the Table, a panel discussion. I am Charlita Richardson, the Executive Director for the Florida College Access Network and your host for today's webinar. Before we get started, we just want to share a few housekeeping items. First, we welcome your questions. We want to learn together, so at any time, please submit your questions through the dashboard, and you'll see a box that says Q&A. Second, please share what you are learning on your favorite social media platform, and be sure to tag FCAN at FL College Access. Also use the hashtag FCAN and hashtag Talent Strong Florida. We would love to hear what's resonating with you. We also encourage you to reach out to our partners with seats at the table. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and all materials will be made available within 1 week of the recording. Now, before we get started, I like to always share a little bit about FCAN for our new listeners. So FCAN's mission is to lead a collaborative movement to ensure that every Floridian achieves an education beyond high school and a rewarding career. And our vision is that we see this through Florida working together, where education is the pathway to economic mobility for all. Within FCAN, we accomplish our work through 3 primary ways that shine a light on the practices at the local and state level. First, with our research and data, we actually publish research and data evidence-based practices and policy opportunities that actually strengthen Florida's talent pool. Second, our local college access networks. These are a cross-sector coalition of leaders that collaborate to remove barriers and provide support for student success. And then third, our statewide initiatives, where we coordinate 4 College Ready Florida initiatives that provide schools and community organizations free resources to help students continue their education for life after high school. Now, within FCAN also, our work is guided by what we call our 7 conditions for success, which you can find out more about on our website. But specifically, today's webinar provides great examples of these conditions, particularly opportunity for everyone, multiple pathways to success, and community collaboration. As we prepare to share and learn a little bit more about seats at the table and what's transpiring, we'd like to share some promising changes related to post-secondary education access that will impact incarcerated individuals. The FAFSA Simplification Act will become sentence blind. What this means is that ultimately all incarcerated individuals, regardless of the sentence length or conviction, can actually now qualify for Pell Grants. This act will cover people in jails, prisons, juvenile, and civic commitment settings. When the act takes effect, which should be no later than July 1st, 2023, up to 463,000 people who are currently incarcerated will be eligible for financial aid nationally. This act comes with new reporting requirements, including demographics of incarcerated students and receiving Pell Grants to make it easier to monitor the success of these programs. It's these type of changes that really greatly help to influence and move the needle. Now, it is my extreme pleasure to take an opportunity to introduce our panelists for today's discussion. First, we have Chris Farina. Chris Farina was born and raised in Baltimore, 1 block away from Pulaski High School, which was the subject of his first award-winning documentary, Route 40. He continued this focus on roadside communities with his second film, West Main Street, telling the stories of individuals who lived and worked along the street in Charlottesville, Virginia, where he moved for his undergraduate education at the University of Virginia and still resides. After obtaining an MA in communications at American University, he made another award-winning film, World Peace and the Other 4th Grade Achievements, which had its world premiere at the South by Southwest Film Festival and has garnered awards at several film festivals, including the Youth Vision Award at the United Nations Association Film Festival. This film focused on public school teacher John Hunter and his World Peace Game, which was the subject of a very widely seen TED Talk by Hunter in 2011. And subsequently, this film was also broadcast on television stations across the world. His most recent film, Seats at the Table, presents another educational portrait of a class which connects university students with residents of a maximum security juvenile correction center through the study of great works of Russian literature. Farina has been drawn to telling the stories of individuals whose profound contributions to their community has gone unnoticed, expanding the audience's notion of what it means to be human. Our second panelist, Neil Valls. Neil serves as the Deputy Director for the Florida Rights Restoration Center and has more than 25 years of experience working as a public servant and community advocate. This includes work as the Chief of Staff for a member of Congress and the Staff Director for a full congressional committee, as well as the Outreach Director of one of the fastest growing churches in the country, to name a few of his roles. Additionally, Valls' career includes working as an entrepreneur, leading numerous social and media campaigns, and successfully representing clients as a lobbyist at 2 top 100 law firms. Before joining FRRC, Neil worked for a leading homeless services and drug alcohol addiction ministry program in Southwest Florida. While in Washington, Valls helped negotiate and secure passage of the Help America Vote Act, which has improved voting accessibility and accuracy for millions of people. He is the former president of the board of directors for Be the Light, an anti-human trafficking organization, and has served on numerous other boards. Valls is the author of the book Into the Sun and speaks to the local, state, and federal organizations about his work on Amendment 4 in Florida and the experiences that led to and followed to his felony conviction. He is a former guest lecturer at the U.S. Naval Academy, was named the top hired gun in Hill's newspaper annual list of top lobbyists, and named to roll call newspaper list of 50 most powerful Capitol Hill staffers, numerous times during his career on Capitol Hill. Neil received his bachelor's degree from The Ohio State University and currently lives in Fort Myers, Florida with his wife, Pam. Our next panelist, Kimberly Moore, has spent over a decade in the workforce development arena. She currently serves as the Vice President for the Workforce Innovation at Tallahassee Community College. In this position of Vice President, she is responsible for developing strategic solutions that address the needs of employers and those seeking to enter or advance in the workforce. Prior to joining TCC, she served as the Chief Executive Officer of Workforce Plus, the regional economic and workforce development body. Dr. Moore is a graduate of Tallahassee Community College with an Associate of Arts degree. She continued her the at the Florida State University, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice, and continued on to earn her MBA from Webster University and a doctorate from the Florida State University. She is a proud member of Leadership Tallahassee Class 24 and Leadership Florida Class 33. In addition to her role at TCC, she continues to give back to her community through service. A few of Dr. Moore's many volunteer roles include serving as chair of the Leon County Research Development Authority, vice chair of the Florida A&M University Board of Trustees, and vice chair of the Economic Vitality Leadership Council, to name a few. She has been vastly recognized for her service and commitment to excellence, with accolades including the Greater Tallahassee Chamber of Commerce Distinguished Leadership Pacesetter Award, the Tallahassee Women's Magazine 2016 Women Who Mean Business Innovator of the Year Award, the 2021 Idleland Carr Exemplary Leadership Award, the 2021 TC Eagle Award, and 2022 Trailblazer Award, to name a few of her accolades. And then our final panelist joining us today is Samantha Carlo. Samantha is a native Floridian who received her Bachelor of Arts in Criminology from Florida State University in 1998 and a Master of Science in Criminal Justice from the University of Central Florida in 2000. Prior to her appointment to a full-time faculty position in 2006 at Miami-Dade College, Professor Carlo worked at the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office to promote alternative sentencing strategies for clients with severe mental illness and substance abuse disorders. At Miami-Dade College, Professor Carlo prides herself on combining the practical with the theoretical in her criminal justice courses to include motivating students to conceptualize a more solutions-focused correctional system. In 2013, Professor Carlo introduced the ISUBA program to Miami-Dade College and the Florida Department of Corrections. ISUBA is the word abuse in reverse, and the curriculum aims to reverse the effects of abuse. The success of ISUBA program was the catalyst for the creation of the Institute of Educational Empowerment, or IEE, at Miami-Dade College. IEE's mission is to provide post-secondary educational opportunities inside correctional institutions, so individuals who are incarcerated have an opportunity to transform through education. IEE also aims to assist returning citizens in the transition from prison to college. Due to Professor Carlo's work, she was awarded the Endowed Teaching Chair in 2014, the highest honor for college professors. Professor Carlo is a certified professor for the Inside Out Prison Exchange Program. And due to her efforts, Miami-Dade College was selected as a second chance Pell experimental site and now has an associate in art program that was launched at the Everglades Correctional Institution. Please join me in welcoming our panelists for today, and we are so excited. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that we can get into this discussion. And we will start with allowing everyone an opportunity to just introduce themselves and share a little bit more of their work. So Chris, I'm going to start with you, as you are the person who prepared and created this documentary that we've had an opportunity to view. So if you could share a little bit more about your inspiration for the documentary film.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chloe. And to be honest, I'm the panelists and the really wonderful work you guys do. I feel really honored to even have the film perhaps generate some attention for your work, because I think it's really important. So I feel blessed to even be part of this. What happened was, because I had made that film about a local teacher, someone introduced me to Andrew Kaufman, who was the professor and creator of the Books Behind Bars class that's featured in the film. And I went down to the correctional center and observed the class. And I have to admit, I was basically just sitting there on the side of the room and was so moved to tears by what I saw. And it wasn't just the inherent sadness of being in a correctional center and becoming aware of the lives of the youth who were living there, but it was really the beauty of the connection, the authenticity of the relationships that were working around those tables. And it was just so obvious to me of how their hearts and souls really connected to each other. And they talked about their lives through the prism of Russian literature. And for me, I'm often focused on kind of emotional connection. And so that emotion that I felt, I knew literally that first day that I need to share this emotion with an audience. And let's face it, I mean, so often we look at people as labels and stereotypes and not as individual brothers and sisters. And yet when we make that kind of connection, we realize by taking care of our brothers or sisters, we're taking care of all of us. And that was really the purpose of the film, was to connect an audience to those individuals that were in that class.
That's so powerful to hear and really talk. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that connection piece a little bit later. So Neil, I'm going to turn to you right now and really focus on the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. You all are best known for kind of restoring the voting rights for 1.5 million returning citizens through a referendum. But that's not all that you do. So please share with our audience more about your mission as an organization and the work that you do to help returning citizens.
Well, thank you, Charlita, and Chris, thanks for what you said, and Samantha and Dr. Moore. Like, I feel like I need to get my life in order after hearing all the stuff that you guys are doing. So incredibly grateful to be on the panel discussion. I think this is a vitally important topic. So really grateful for shining a light on it. The Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, we are an organization that is led by, made up of tens of thousands of people all across the state who have been impacted by the criminal justice system. Those of us like myself with past felony convictions, family members, people who have had their lives impacted by kind of the systems that we have in society around our criminal legal system. And ultimately, our North Star is we love people, right? We love our communities. We want to take the pain and even the challenges that we've had in our lives and turn them into purpose and ultimately into a better society for everybody. So we always try and kind of center our conversations around the fact that what we're trying to do in Florida is to make the world a better place and make society better for everybody. We believe that in the mission that is kind of our North Stars is built around the families of those impacted by the criminal justice system. And what we see in terms of how we can build a better society is to reduce the barriers that exist around reentry into the community. We think it's very important for all of us to see each other as fellow human beings and to change the narratives around how we see each other. but also it involves very serious work around engaging the systems that are enacted that create barriers to economic mobility, that create barriers to housing, that create barriers to education and opportunity. Also that create barriers, like you mentioned, to voting. And we're kind of best known for our work around Amendment 4 and liberating 1.5 million people from a 150-year-old policy that had created a lifetime ban on voting in the state of Florida. But ultimately, our real mission is deeper than that. It is to kind of change the narratives, not only around how people see those of us impacted by the system, how we see ourselves, and how we're able to engage the community and move forward with our lives. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of cast that bigger vision. But at the end of the day, we know that if people have been impacted by the system are able to get employment, we know that, when you talk about a population, those of us, with past felony convictions, we're 10 times more likely to be homeless, right? That there's real challenges to accessing higher ed, that there's challenges to accessing capital, to becoming entrepreneurs, to being like anybody else in the community. And our view is that when we can focus on fixing those system problems, everybody in the community actually benefits. So that when people get jobs, when people are able to get housing, what we see is, folks who are better able to chase their dreams and live out the American dream for themselves. And in that process, they're less likely to reoffend. They're less likely to do some of the things that we might have done in a different part of our life. And in doing so, we can actually create a better community and society for everybody.
Thank you, Neil, for sharing that. And I'm already hearing a common theme between you and Chris as well. So that's great. Kim, if you could kind of share with us a little bit more about the work and the programs that TCC leads and how you all help citizens returning access education and other supports.
I will first tell you that one, we certainly believe in second chances. That's at the core of our mission. I think the second thing that I would point out that we recognize that change occurs through collaboration and partnership. We could not do what we do without the Florida Department of Correction and the great partnership that we hold, as well as the belief that really that when you focus on second chances, it's not about periods and doors being closed. It's about commas that allows a person to see what's next in their life. And because of that, we've been able to create some amazing programs that are holistic in nature, that point to how they connect with employers. Some of those programs include offering GED programs, behind the walls, intensive reading, success coaches, case management, masonry programs, electrical, HVAC, culinary, building trades, plumbing, CNC, welding, industrial pipe fitting, literally just to name a few. And that, even spills over into pipe fitting, and even where we've just recently launched entrepreneurship, realizing that if you can't get a job, that certainly you'll be tooled to create a job, that you can become an employer. So really it's been about the power of the individual, the power of us, the power of collaboration. And I would say that has extended or allowed us to not only scale as one of the largest providers of contracted workforce services for the department and agency, but also to look on the outside where we provide training services to both work release as well as those that are on probation. So it really an inside out, and one that we've been able to braid funding. That's something that we always talk about too. How can you attract funding? We've been able to match the collaborative funding received from the Department of Corrections with funding that we've received from Department of Education to launch pre-apprenticeship programs at every institution where we're delivering workforce training. Just to add a little bit.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. Right?
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Samantha, you're definitely last but not least. I will say some of our participants that's viewing this webinar probably are surprised to see you, because we learned about you all as we were preparing for this webinar. So we want to take an opportunity to just allow you to share a little bit more about the work that you're doing with the Institution for Educational Empowerment at Miami-Dade College, and learn a little bit more about those second chances through education program that you've launched.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be added in at the last minute, fourth quarter. So, but I'm so happy to be here with all the other panelists. I think we all are of the same mind and heart that people should not be judged for their worst day or their biggest mistake. and that we should be a society of redemption and allow people to have the opportunities to move past their worst indiscretion. So at the heart of our program at Miami-Dade College is this focus on humanity. We try to move away from labels. We denounce the word inmate. We don't use that in our language. All of the students that we interact with are students. And so we even had to kind of help shift, the common language for our actual students. And they've said to me, well, if you don't call us inmates, then what are we? And so that launched a whole discussion on using or moving away from dehumanizing language and treating people as human beings. Everyone on this panel, everyone on the audience has made mistakes that they don't want to be judged for the rest of their lives. And Miami-Dade College, the mission is that we're democracy's college. And for us, that includes people who are sitting in carceral spaces. Florida has the third largest prison population in the country. At one point, we were at about 105,000 at the height of this Get Tough on Crime movement. We're at about 85,000 right now, but that still is a lot of people that get placed behind prison walls, prison bars, and society tends to forget about them. And so Miami-Dade College wants to be that catalyst for change for students who are interested in making a shift in their lives. And we've learned since 2014, 2013, which is when we entered the prisons with our ASUBA program, we've learned how hungry and how motivated the students are to be true academics. So we want to bring that academic component. We know a lot of the focus is on workforce development, and we're in favor of that as well. But we want students to navigate the curriculum and the content that interests them, and offer them a wide range of coursework in a true liberal arts fashion. So that's what we're running now, is an Associate of Arts program at Everglades Correctional Institution. We could not have done it without the partnership with Florida Department of Corrections. They have to let us in each week. They have to provide us the technology that our students need to thrive and be successful in their academic courses. So we're grateful to them, and we're looking for an expansion. And Miami-Dade College has the goal of offering coursework to any person who resides in a correctional institution in the state of Florida, and also expanding to the Federal Bureau of Prisons, which is a different bureaucracy, but we'll navigate that as well. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. And thank you to you, all of you, for being here with us. The one common thread I really heard throughout this, and Samantha said, and use a term, you avoid using this dehumanizing language. I always like to refer to it's about being affirmative, and that affirmative language. And I also heard the connection of this human connection and that thread, and Chris started us along that. So Chris, I'm going to circle back to you and really let's talk a little bit more about that human connection. And we noticed in the film that the students, both groups, began to see each other differently. They began to really understand and really try to figure out how things in their lives were impacted. Can you speak to why this matters, just beyond even just a classroom setting, but even specifically, why does everyone deserve a seat at the table? What's so important about that?
Well, I mean, this is just me as an individual. I kind of feel like this country is getting more tied up into their own bubbles, and we're having less of a connection than we used to have. And I think that's the stratification of class as well. But it also, I think it has something to do with the development of social media. And I really feel like that could harm us in many ways, because people aren't as willing or not as part of their life is to connect to others. And when you think about that, of bringing people to the seat at the table, it's not just for the benefit. I mean, it's also inclusivity of how you bring others to the table, but the people that are already sitting there will benefit from it because they'll understand the perspective of others. And let's face it, this is a democracy. And the whole idea is that the more we can understand each other and treat ourselves, and not just as the United States, but us the better it would be. And we will learn. And it really, and that was one of the things about the class. You know, a lot of people had this more of a little bit of a stereotypical view of the students coming in to teach the correctional center students. And yet the more you get to know that class, the learning happens on both sides in a very strong way. And so both groups really benefit from this experience. And when you think about it, like for the work that you guys are, the various groups are doing, you're benefiting those people who are incarcerated, but you're also benefiting their families and the community that they've returned to. And we all have a stake in that, so that the more effort we put into creating that connection, the better society we'll create.
You hit the nail on the head, because it's bigger than just the individuals who are incarcerated. It's also about the families. They're somebody's brother, son, sister, daughter, etc. And their dreams and hopes is there for them. So Neil, I'm going to come to you and ask this. In many cases, incarcerated individuals have actually experienced trauma as well. So how do you all help to build support for that passage of the referendum that changed, and how can the community kind of rally behind? Because it's, like I said, they're individuals that we have to see, and we need to see, and we need to remove them from being that othered category.
Yeah, I'm so with, as a big question, and I think it really gets to the deeper work that everybody on these panels do, and that does involve kind of being in proximity to people, and seeing people as people, right? Like those two things go together, and that was really at the heart, and is at the heart of the movement that passed Amendment 4. We love talking about what happened, right? You saw a 150-year-old Jim Crow law come tumbling down, a law that banned over 1.5 million people almost from exercising their voice in society and feeling an ownership over their own community and in their own lives. But that came about in one of the what I think is even in more amazing stories is how it happened. There was a commitment to see people as people that underlied the entire movement, and still does, right? That we believe very strongly in this idea that when we can see people as people and not see them as the worst mistake that was ever made, or as somebody on the other team, or, you know, and kind of walk out our own principles, amazing things are possible, right? Desmond, our executive director, right, like has a big vision around Amendment 4. And when he shared that with people initially, we were told by everybody who knows anything, you can't do that. You can't come into a state as evenly divided as Florida and talk about race and crime and voting and get over 60% of the vote, unless you build a movement around love, right? And that is what Love won in 2018 in November. And it did so because the movement was built around the real lives of people rather than something else. We knew we were going to pass that amendment when we started hearing stories of folks going into the voting booth and saying, I'm voting for my aunt, I'm voting for my cousin, I'm voting for that person who I learned lived up the street from me, who had an experience that I could connect with, and I'm voting for them out of love. I'm not voting for my political party, as important as political parties might be. I'm not voting for the governor candidate, as important as that might be. I'm voting for a loved one. And I think that frame is vitally important when we even talk about policies, when we talk about how do we engage and make change, because the conversation around what would you do to your loved one if they found themselves in jail or in prison, or is vitally different than what would you do to that person who you think it's okay to just discard from society. And those are wildly different conversations. And we think it's incredibly strategic for all of us who care to understand how important that concept is and to see what happens when you do it. Amendment 4 is a reflection of very strategic, well thought out ideas that involve with how do we see each other, how do we communicate with each other, and how do we build a movement together that believes in people first and lets the other stuff take care of itself.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Neil. And it made me actually think about a part in the film where there were 2 students from UVA who had family members, and that's how they connected. And to your point, Neil, when you're saying, people are going into the voting booth, they're voting for people that they know, their loved ones. So that is that love connection, that movement. So great. I'm going to switch hats a little bit now and talk a little bit about partnership and collaboration and knowing that it's going to take so many people at the table to really move this. And so Kim, the film actually shared a really great example, bringing together, again, from different backgrounds to find this common ground. How do you build that common ground, and how are partnerships such a critical piece of the work that you're doing when you're talking about building these second chances opportunities?
I think partnerships and certainly vision and having a shared vision is certainly the way to go. I tell you though, for us, it really starts with the individuals that we're serving first. I mentioned earlier about success coaches and motivation coaches, and you're probably saying, well, why would you have that if you got the hard skill training? It's because we're building these individuals back up so that they can understand that there is value. There's value in what they bring to the table, and that they have something, a marketable skill that says, yes, I can come back into my community and be productive. Once we've accomplished that, then it is our responsibility as a college. We've made it our mission to tell that story, telling it in a very human way, telling it in addition, with our graduations. Each of our classes has a formal commencement, just like any of our other traditional students, cap and gown, family members there, student speaker, everything that makes it real and that they have something powerful to contribute back. From there, we then message that on the outside world, in our social media and our print media, all telling the stories of these individuals and the difference that it's making in their lives. When others hear this from our voice, our lens, they are then able and honestly have a desire to partner. Some of those partnerships for us has led to, for one, Truist, the Truist Foundation, formerly when we think about SunTrust and BB&T, they are a prime sponsor of TCC and certainly Department of Corrections. With this collaboration, under this partnership, we have stood up transitional services so that when these individuals, our students, our alums, transition from incarceration, that they can receive additional supports that allow them to transition seamlessly into their communities. Why did that collaboration happen? We tied it to the mission of Truist Bank, the idea of making communities stronger, the idea of making sure that everybody in a community has the ability to contribute and add value. So that the storytelling is critical. I think another initiative that I would point out is one where we partnered for at-risk youth. This is with Goodwill Big Ben of the Big Ben. It's the 5th partnership, 1 out of 5 in the nation, but it really is founded on collaboration, what we do best and how we can meet a community need that turns into a community win. So really storytelling, telling it over and figuring out how we can connect the dots and not duplicate services, but certainly leverage what we're doing to make a difference in our local communities.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Samantha, you all are actually, engaged in a lot of partnerships as well. So, and your unique partnership, and you said in your intro, you couldn't do this without the support of the correction system. So can you share kind of how you all formed the partnerships with the correctional institution, especially places like Everglades?
Sure. Well, like I said before, we first entered various prisons within the Florida Department of Corrections in about 2013 with ASUBA. The prisons, including local prisons and leaders, and also Tallahassee, is very receptive to outside entities coming in and doing programming, because their mission is security, right? Their mission is for their officers to go to work each day, do their job, and keep people safe. They also have an educational component, but that's through high school or GED, high school equivalency or GED. And so they have to rely on outside entities to deliver, curriculum past high school equivalency. And so in our experience, we've always just had leadership very willing to partner, and we feel very fortunate because we know they are the key holders for us to get into the facilities. And I think when you run a quality program, when you run a program that they know is motivated to effectuate change and help students, find that change within themselves, I think they're receptive. You know, of course, there are security measures, there's training that has to take place with all of our faculty and staff that go into the prison. But at the base level, it's about human beings reaching out to human beings, telling the Florida Department of Corrections what we want to do, and seeing how we can do that within the parameters of a correctional setting. So we're really happy, you know, when we first introduced the concept of technology inside a prison and computers with internet access. I mean, most prisons are like, no, we can't do that. But we were lucky. Our IT teams worked with their IT teams and we got it together, and we're trying to expand offerings. We have some Zoom class sessions for faculty who can't make it into the prison. Our students are connected to a learning management system, so they're submitting assignments just like our traditional on-campus students are. So they're exposed to the reality of education the way it looks now. And we're just grateful for the partnership. But I think it's just connecting our team, connecting with their team, and us having a shared vision that incarceration itself does not fix the problem. You need to introduce different interventions. And all the research shows, from Rand to Pew to all the big researchers, that education is the way to effectuate change for people who are incarcerated. You know, religious-based programming is important. Substance abuse courses are important. But when people sit and study for an exam, they get an A, they get a B, there's so much pride in our students when they're finally seeing, you know, I should have given this school thing a shot when I was younger. What did I do with my life? So it's showing that it's never too late to get an education. And the Florida Department of Corrections is our ability, you know, our kind of gate pass into the facilities to be able to offer this.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's not missed on me that the whole partnership and collaboration is also seen in the film. So Chris, I'm going to circle back to you, because we had an audience question that came in earlier, well, prior to during registration, and someone wanted to understand, I guess, the logistics of teaching and filming and especially in a correctional facility. Maybe there's an aspiring filmmaker out there, or someone who wants to coordinate something similar. So could you share a little bit more about that?
Well, you know, when I first observed the class, it took a couple years before I would receive permission to actually make the film. And so I kept going in, and Andrew Kaufman, the professor, he was really doing this on his own, because at that point he was just an adjunct, and it wasn't like he had huge institutional support. And the amount of work that he had to do to make this class happen he would do it every spring semester, was really impressive, because, you know, there were a lot of logistical issues, there were legal issues, there was working with the bureaucracy, there was recruiting both the students from the correctional center and the students from the university. And yet he was so driven by it that he put in that work to make it happen. And he's now, you know, he's been teaching this now for about 12 years. And so that was, and again, I was just like, it actually really helped me by being there for a while, because I had a better sense of what the film would be when I finally got the permission. And then after getting the permission, the Department of Juvenile Justice was very restrictive on access. I mean, they weren't allowing me to just show their whole life in the facility. So it was very much, they imposed kind of a restriction that this was basically going to be on this class. And in a way that helped me, in that it meant that the film was very much going to focus on the individual youths. And so the whole idea was to really capture their conversations around the table with the university students, and also capture their thoughts and emotions through the interviews that I conducted with them. And I realized, okay, this wasn't going to be a flashy film. Instead, it was simply listening to others and connecting the audience to those others, so that they really, again, it's always about creating a sense of heart and soul, and really relating to other people as fellow human beings.
Thank you, Chris. Neil, I'm gonna come back to you now as we talked about partnerships, and you all have done a lot of like advocacy work. We know that policy change is also critical to this whole process. And you shared a little bit more about, restoring the rights of the returning citizens. Can you share a little bit in terms of the experience of removing the barriers and that keep too many people from building a life that they are proud of? Like, how did you all galvanize the partnership, the collaboration with that? How did you, impact and move forward with this policy changes that needed to take place?
Yeah, one, thanks for that question. And I do think some of that comes back to kind of the heartbeat, even just what Chris was talking about in terms of, as it relates to Amendment 4 and the large collaborative effort that was. I mean, it really did come from the pain of people who were dealing with a broken system and built out from that. Like, it was a very organic process that allowed us to end up with a broad collaboration of people from all walks of life, from all political persuasions, every region of the state, people who got behind that vision and the power of forgiveness and redemption and ultimately restoration. And we see that playing out again right now, right? Because much of our work, we're multi-pronged, we're doing a lot of things at the same time, but we see this moment in time as a real opportunity around economic mobility and around second chance employment. We know that there are employers across the state who have reached out to us over the last year and a half or so. Reentry professionals, kind of our network just have come alive and said, gosh, there are these barriers that exist for people with records, to simply access employment. What can we do to tear down some of these barriers? And we've seen this kind of same grassroots, very people-focused effort lead to changes in a variety of municipalities in the state of Florida in the last year, in which we've seen, kind of expanded ban the box efforts, incentive programs created, all geared towards how do we help our communities by tearing down these barriers that exist. And you talk about collaboration, that has led us to do dozens of job fairs all across the state with, the Department of Corrections, the Chambers of Commerce, local governments, Career Source, OIC. I mean, we work with Operation New Hope, across the St. Matthew's House, in different settings. An organization called Better Together has been a great partner with us. We've probably done 8 to 10 events with local churches. That happens to be how they set up their second chance employment efforts, so goodwill. And the last thing I will say is that we do try our best to just stay focused on the real needs of people. So one of the things is also like being willing and responsive to what we're hearing, right? For instance, the barrier around voting is complicated by financial obligations, fines and fees that people owe. So we build in to a lot of our events and the conversations around the barriers is a direct opportunity through our fines and fees program to remove that barrier that exists for somebody. And you ask about what that feels like or what you see transformation. Like people could talk about the 2020 election a million different ways. You know what I got to do? Desmond got to do? We got to cross the state all day, every day for weeks in a bus and have people celebrate democracy with us. Nothing compares to somebody who's been blocked out of the system for decades coming up to you. They don't even know you. They think they know you because they might have seen a picture or something like that, hugging you and talking to you about an entirely new life. And it doesn't just impact them, it impacts those around them. The impact even just on voting, in which you see family members turn out at much higher levels of people who previously were unable to vote. You see how we do life, right? Like we're people, we're relational people, so we have an impact on those around us. So one good thing feeds to the next, and so I think that is crucial as well to this kind of collaborative effort that we really are better together.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Neil. And really, that focus of being better together and the impact and result of really all of us coming together. That's how we impact social change and systems changes. Thinking and speaking of systems change, Kim, coming to you, we know that a lot of the policies within the college actually had to change as a result of the commitment to this work. And I would love to hear a little bit more about how some of those changes, as well as how were you able to ultimately, forge and reduce the barriers to access to post-secondary education as a result, because this is that big picture. We have to focus on the system to get to where we need to be.
Absolutely. You have to work inside out. And that's the same thing with college systems or other structures. One of the things that I did, and I know that President Murdoch, who leads Tallahassee Community College, will appreciate me sharing a story about our own journey. And that included, I invited him once we formed a collaboration and partnership with the Department of Corrections in our first GED commencement ceremony. I invited our president to serve as our keynote speaker. And he was so excited at the opportunity to do that. And he asked me a few comments before he got up to do his remarks. And he said, Kim, I'm going to tell them that, you know what, they can come to TCC afterwards. I said, well, great, but there's a problem. And he said, what's that? I said, well, our policy says that, you know, there's a 6-month window that, you know, they can't enroll at the institution. He's like, I'm changing that. I said, great. So he was the first one. He went up, he did his keynote address and shared that you will be a student at TCC. And he shared that, hey, we learned about that policy and we were making the change. He immediately came back with our student affairs office, changed our handbook, made sure we went through the necessary protocols. But again, looking, if we're really buying into the second chance business and belief, we realize that we have to be willing to change our processes. And that was a big one. The fact that when our students complete our programs, they receive an alum pin, because we tell them you're joining the over 50,000 graduates of TCC. So all of those pieces that make it real, that it's not just a conversation while you're inside, it really is a conversation and belief in you that follows you on the outside.
Thank you. Now, Samantha, I'm coming to you for the big change that's happening, as I shared at the beginning of this webinar, that the FAFSA Simplification Act will be in 2023. And we know that means that 26-year ban on the second chance Pell Grants is getting lifted finally. What have been the biggest barriers that you've seen to helping incarcerated students with the Pell Grants?
So thank you for the question. Do you have 3 hours? No. So we're in what's called an experimental site initiative. So we were selected by the Federal Department of Education to launch a second chance Pell pilot program, which means our college can receive Pell Grant funding on behalf of students who are incarcerated. And so that's how we've been funding our courses. That will now become open to all colleges, so they don't have to be selected by the Federal Department of Education. But that means you also have to have individuals at each college who want to push forward this type of program. And it's very challenging to launch either whether it's an AA, a bachelor's degree program inside of a carceral setting. In Florida, we have, to me, some unique challenges, and more challenges than my colleagues around the country have. And it's not because of policies within the Florida Department of Corrections. Our biggest challenge lies in the residency statute for in-state tuition, but specifically the interpretation of the statute. So for all purposes, if you're incarcerated in the state of Florida, that incarceration means you are not a resident, right? You cannot establish residency through incarceration. And so for us to be able to fund the courses through Pell Grants for our students, they have to establish residency so they can qualify for in-state tuition. I'll give you an example. A typical 3-credit class at Miami-Dade College is about $360 if you're a resident. If you're not, it's closer to $1,500. And so Pell funding does not cover the tuition at an out-of-state rate. The challenge is the way our Department of Education in Florida interprets the residency statute. And so because you can't qualify as a resident by nature of incarceration, the interpretation of the policy is that we have to go 1 year prior to their incarceration date and find the required documents to establish Florida residency. So I'll give you an example. We have a student, I'll say his name is Michael. Michael's been in prison since 1991. Which means we have to go back to 1990, right? In 1990, Michael was under the age of 24. And we might say, what's this 24 business? Well, if you're 24, if you're under 24 in the state of Florida, you establish your residency through your parents to qualify for in-state tuition. Well, what happens if you're Michael, whose parents are now both deceased, right? And so that's one example of it's a challenge to establish his residency. There has to be some emancipation kind of claim. But even for someone not like Michael, let's say there's someone who came to prison when they were 30 and they're now 60, right? How do they have access to their documents when they were 30 to establish residency? So I've physically drove to relatives' houses like 2 hours away to go through boxes of documents with family members to prove that this person who never left Florida ever, always lived here, but to find the documentation that the college can accept in order to remain in compliance with residency requirements. Otherwise, the college gets in trouble, right? So our biggest challenge, it takes us about 6 months on average to establish Florida residency for one applicant. And that's our team going back and forth. If they're lucky enough to have family members to help, that's great. If that family member can use technology like scanning documents and emailing, that's even better. But we're talking about, populations that have been disenfranchised in many ways, right? And so it's just a huge burden because we have people committed to this cause at the college, but it's not their full-time job. They have other full-time jobs. And then I throw on top of that, here's 30 applicants. Let's see if we can get residency. And I've promised a lot of lunch and dinner to a lot of people. Never paid up, but promise. It is just really, really challenging. So anyone on this webinar, we've been trying to get these residency, requirements and again, interpretation of a statute. It's not codified in state language. It's how the Department of Education interprets it. Even the Florida Department of Corrections tries to lobby on our behalf because they see what we go through. And there's nothing worse than telling an applicant who says, I'm so excited to start college, and you have to break it to them and say, listen, we haven't been able to establish your residency yet. We're trying. We keep trying. They come and find me in the prison and they found some number of an aunt somewhere who might have access to some paper somewhere. But it's really, really difficult. And the challenge is really only for state colleges or universities. Private colleges, universities in the state of Florida that are not offering this programming, they don't have that same challenge, right? Because they don't have to qualify their students as state residents. So that's our biggest challenge. There are others, but there's not time for that right now.
Well, look, Samantha, I actually hear a call to action there, and it sounds like it's a rally in that interpretation, as you said. And so that's going to shift because I'm mindful of the time, and I want to give you all an opportunity to really talk about what is that call to action? What can people do in their organizations, their communities, even as Florida residents? And Chris, I know you're in my home state of Virginia, but so you're taking a national perspective here, but what can they do? And I'll start with you, Chris.
Well, to be honest, what I was hoping the film would have the effect of was really inspire both educators and people in the correctional center, policymakers, to consider replicating this type of model so that more of our youth can benefit from it. And we do have a couple of examples. I mean, there was a professor at the University of Northern Michigan who reached out, who showed the film to their university, and she is now working with Andy Kaufman to help bring this class to their university. And then we had in Virginia, a district attorney is called the Commonwealth Attorney, and the local deputy Commonwealth Attorney watched the film on a public TV broadcast and literally went into her office the next day and said, we have to bring this program to our local prison, reached out to Andy Kaufman, and about 6 months later, they actually started it. So now the university youth are also going into the local men's prison with this class as well. And for me, I mean, that was just the the simplest thing to see what a benefit of a film if more lives are changed and affected by inspiring this type of educational work.
Thank you. So replication is step one, or one of the steps, everyone. Neil, what about you? What can we do? What's the call to action?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the call to action, I really kind of think about believe, know, and engage, right? So believe that you can make a difference. If there's somebody on this call, like this work matters, the loved one that you might be thinking of, or it might be your life, or somebody that their life matters and the mission matters. Two is that know that it can make society better for everybody. It's weird headwinds, I think, that we live in right now, where it's almost like our phone's algorithms, how we communicate, all these different systems are almost set up to divide, almost set up to like create fear that it's like, oh, if one group of people benefits, then that has to mean that another group of people lose. It's a relatively subversive idea, and I always take at least 30 seconds to like train ourselves to see that we can make a difference for the entire community in this work. And then the other is engage, right? Like our organization, we love it when people try to, sign up or get involved in our events. You can go to our website, FloridaRRC.com. And there's a variety of different ways to get plugged in. Our primary constituency, our membership, really folks who are directly impacted by the system, but we have events and we appreciate collaborating with anyone and everyone to help improve lives in the state of Florida. So those are kind of the three basic points. I'm kind of like Samantha, you get me going. Can I get 3 hours, but I don't think we have time. So I just want to say thank you to everybody for really putting this thing together and empowering folks to get involved.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. Kim.
I'll be brief. I'll say that change starts with each of us, and certainly education is such a powerful tool. So community colleges, those of you that are listening, it's never too late to get started. I will tell you that the Florida Department of Corrections, and in particular, the Director, Office of Programs and Reentry, Patrick Mahoney, plug there. He is ready and willing to add additional college institutions and partners. So he is waiting on your call. So act today.
Awesome. And Samantha, I know you gave us a little bit, but any other call to action that you would like to say?
I would just say if there's individuals who have the mentality that someone in prison deserves to be there, should stay there forever, and that society should forget about them, I think that's really faulty thinking. Every year, close to 700,000 people are released from prison in this country. And if we don't start to change the way we receive them and also, what we provide to them while they're incarcerated, we're going to continue to see this repetition of criminal behavior. People who come out of prison need support. They don't need to be reminded constantly of what they did 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. We're not forgetting about the victims. Like Neil said, it's not an either or. We're mindful of that. But where the college, we're about forward thinking and trying to make sure that we contribute to our society. People get out of prison, they become our neighbors. They go to the grocery stores we go to, they, marry our loved ones. And so we need to view this from a humane perspective. And also it's important that people help fund these programs. Pell dollars, that's the only funding the college gets, and that's to cover tuition. So, I don't know about TCC, but Miami-Dade College has a fund set up with our, for donations purposes with our foundation, and just look into those type of opportunities. $1 towards education goes a long way, and the more we infuse education in prisons, the less we have to spend on prisons as a society.
Thank you. So I heard replicate, which is part of the program in the film. If you replicate some of this, that helps develop that human connection. Believe, know, engage. Change starts with each of us, and adjust the way that we receive individuals re-entering and what we provide, funds, programs, things like that. So that is our call to action, everyone that's joining us for the webinar. And I want to take an opportunity on behalf of FCAN to thank our panelists today. Thank you, Chris, Neil, Samantha, Kim, so much for just joining and sharing your insights. As we know, post-secondary education and access to post-secondary education is critical as we talk about economic mobility, as we talk about the success of our state here in Florida. And that's why we wanted to host this webinar and really share. We hope that everyone enjoyed enjoyed the Seats at the Table documentary. Thank you, Chris, for leading the way and creating that. And on behalf of FCAN, just so everyone knows, this is our last webinar for the summer. We will return after a 2-month break. So we wish everyone the best over the summer breaks. And we hope that you stay engaged. Please sign up for our webinars, our newsletter, so that you can continue to get information on when we will return with the next webinar. Thank you again and have a great rest of your Thursday afternoon.